manual white balance. So for this scenario, if you see, still I think it's more warm. So let's decrease the, let me just, yeah. So let me just decrease the white balance. You see, you're getting more natural colors when I'm decreasing the white balance. That's because I'm shooting indoors. And of course, the exposure compensation, I want to do it a little plus. Again, we zoom in. Okay, so again, when you zoom in, exposure changes. Again, your exposure compensation, you have to play around with it. But so this is one of the settings what I do. So white balance, if you increase the white balance, it becomes more warm. Decrease the white balance, you get more bluish tones. And that is where you have to play with white balance and adjust it. Okay. And yes, exposure compensation is another one. So again, let me shift it and just help you understand about the concept of exposure compensation at a very high level. So let me just zoom out a little. So this is a rhino, and down if you see, that is a white portion of the frame over there. Now exposure compensation is 0. So the whole concept of metering, if you see, I use metrics or evaluative or the segment metering of Sony. So here the camera just makes everything as medium tone. Now a very important key thing. So again, so when you talk about metering, the very fundamental thing which you have to remember is, like, if you're shooting something dark, you need to underexpose. If you're shooting something bright, you need to overexpose. Of course, this is the whole concept of metering. And in my setup, in my online photography courses, all these are explained in depth in the wildlife course as well as the normal course everywhere. Okay, so that is where is the concept of metering. So at a high level, if I have to show you for this scenario where the rhino is more on the darker tonality, see what happens when you shoot at exposure compensation 0, because the camera internally overexposes when you're shooting any dark subjects. And when you're shooting any bright subjects, internally it underexposes. So that is where you will have to play around with the exposure compensation. And one of the advantages of the mirrorless is it will show you the real-time simulation of the actual exposure, which you don't get to see in the DSLR. So that is another major advantage of mirrorless. So let me show you how it works. Okay, so here as you can see, like it's more bright since it's a darker subject. The camera exposes for the medium tone, and this is where I have to like underexpose. Look at the exposure compensation down there changing. I have to underexpose to get back the right tonalities. So this is how it works. And also, if I just zoom into the lower portion, let me just put it back to 0 now. Okay, and I just zoom into the white portion here. Look at this, look what the camera did. If you're shooting at something bright white, internally the camera underexposes. So if you want to get back the correct exposure, if you're shooting something bright, you have to overexpose it. Okay, so 0.71 stops, it depends. So if I just again move the camera a little bit to this orange, all this flag which I got from Bhutan, I think, yeah, when I went that side. Meghalaya, oh, where did I go recently? Assam, yeah, I think from somewhere northeast I got this. No, this was Bhutan, yep. This was when I went to Manas National Park, so we drove into Bhutan and actually bought it in Bhutan. Okay, so here again, if you're shooting that white, so if you make it back to 0, exposure compensation what the camera gives, as you can see, you're shooting anything more brighter in your frame, which is the white part of the frame over there. So camera underexposes, you have to overexpose. Okay, so this is how the metering works, which is again very important. All these are the fundamentals of photography which you have to understand. And then comes the camera settings. The most important one for me is basically the autofocusing points. Okay, if I have to go into Sony, so these are, let me just see if I can shoot at yeah, this is better. Okay, so on the left side, if you see, these are all the different autofocusing points options available, and this is something majorly missing in some of the other brands. Okay, so the latest brands, mirrorless what the other manufacturers have. So these options are missing. They just have a tracking option, but the autofocusing technology of Sony is way, way ahead of any of them. So this wide, if you see, this is what I use in case if I'm trying to shoot something like a flock of birds which is flying. In that case, I use this wide. That means in the entire frame, whatever comes into picture, the camera will try to focus. Then there is the zone. Then there is the center one, which is just fixed at the center. I'll not be going in depth into each one of them now, because that itself will take a couple of hours at least if I have to explain everything. But the one I use is this focus area, which is tracking. So within this tracking, again, left and right click, if you see spot small is there, spot medium, spot large, then the expand spot, and then the wide, then the zone and everything. Oh, sorry, the center one. So these are all the different size of the autofocusing points I can use within. So generally I use the small. So let me show you the major advantage or why I shifted to Sony. Okay. Now, if I again zoom out a little, and where is my subject? Okay, the eagle. Now, the concept of autofocusing, the way I use it in Sony is, you see that square, right? The white square is there. So what I do is like I keep that white square onto the subject. Whichever I want to focus, I get the white square on that, and then I press. It turns green. Okay. So here, if you see, once it turns green, okay, let me just put back the exposure compensation. Hold on. Okay. So once I aim at the face and then half press it, it turns, wow, this one is actually able to recognize the bird eye. Yeah? Oh my God. So in fact, I've kept the camera in bird eye autofocusing, and the camera for some reason is actually identifying the eagle. It's able to do that. So you see, like from this square, from this one, it got shifted to the eye focusing. Again, now it failed. But this is a doll, it's not supposed to, but okay. So here you see, once I basically focus and get the focusing, no matter where I turn my camera, the tracking will continue to stay there. Look at this. Okay, now it's shifted to eye focus. Look at the camera, like of course I'm doing it very slowly here, but in real time scenario, no matter how fast I move, the camera will not lose focus. So from a composition point of view, once I focus on that, once I lock it, it will track. And then if I want to keep the subject to the complete, say left, I just keep it to the left and then click. That's it. And then again, I can click on that, again, move wherever I want. So this is the major advantage of Sony with the kind of autofocusing tracking what it supports. So as you saw, so these are some of the very basic camera adjustments what I do. So just to again reiterate and recapture the way I approach my camera settings. So majority of the settings are constant. Okay, aperture priority I showed, I just leave it over there. Then aperture priority and then the lowest F number, I keep it there. Exposure triangle, I play with ISO and then keep the shutter speed up and down based on the ISO. White balance, I keep, choose one, keep it constant. Autofocusing you saw, I keep it to the tracking and I just stick to that. I don't change that. That is very powerful. And then it's just the exposure compensation and the ISO. So these are the only two things which I keep playing around it when it comes to the wildlife photography and the basic camera settings what I do. This is all you need, and all these things in a matter of 0 to 2 seconds you have to do it, or even 0 to 1 second, and the rest of the time is basically mainly into composition. Okay. So let me quickly answer any of the queries you have on so far what I've said, and then move on to the composition, which is the other major one. So is it A7 which you're using for presentation? This video what I'm shooting, that is A7S3. And the demo what I did all this time, that is the alpha one with the 200/600. Okay. So do we have to turn this feature on or is automatic? The feature, certain things you'll have to turn it on. By default, it's all set. So is it applicable only for aperture or shutter priority mode? Okay, so Riyansh, which feature are you talking about? You need to just clarify to me, please. You can use an APS-C lens on a full frame body, definitely. So in aperture priority, I don't keep ISO in auto. I always choose the ISO what I want. Okay. So what is the best ISO to use for a moving object? So that is where the shutter speed comes into picture. Depending on what kind of movement, what is happening in the scene, you will have to adjust your ISO accordingly to get a particular shutter speed. So for bird photography, shutter priority, no. And Srihari and everyone, see the main funda here is once you understand exposure triangle parameter, okay, so it doesn't really matter whether it is aperture priority, shutter priority, or even manual exposure. You can play around with any of these exposure modes once you understand the core fundamentals about how these three triangles, how these three parameters work with each other. Now let me just jump over to the advanced setting of the manual exposure, how I basically do it. Okay. So that's the last one in the setting. Again, going back over here. Now, so far what we saw was aperture priority. Okay. Now from aperture priority, what I want to do is I want to now shift to manual focusing. Okay. Now the way I use manual autofocusing. So manual focusing, what happens is like all the three parameters manually you have to set it. So one of the parameters is aperture, which is the f6.3 lowest. So I don't change that. Okay. So I keep it to the lowest. Now comes the other two parameters. So what I generally do when we talk about the manual exposure, I choose a little bit high ISO. Okay. So let's say like I choose the ISO to say ISO 4000. Okay. So ISO 4000 is kept and then f6.3 is kept. Okay. Now the other one is the shutter speed. Now here if you see for that particular scene, that scene is already overexposed. You can even see that +2 is actually blinking. That means it is overexposed. So in this scenario, what I do, I only play around with the shutter speed. So looking at the scene, and thanks to the mirrorless technology where I get the real-time exposure simulation. So in a manual exposure, I keep these two parameters fixed. Then I start playing around with the shutter speed. So look at the exposure compensation. Exposure compensation is now 0. Now, based on my understanding about metering, so if I have to overexpose it, then I choose the shutter speed to little overexpose it. Okay, by 0.3 or 0.7, depending on how much I need. Now, you see the shutter speed is very low. So if I need a higher shutter speed, then immediately I go increase the ISO and then come back and then increase my shutter speed to get a proper exposure. So I keep changing the shutter speed and then the exposure simulation tells me what kind of exposure I'm getting. And also, in fact, in this, I generally, through my viewfinder, I enable the histogram. So you see on the right side bottom, I just enable the histogram. So using the histogram, I check how the exposure is because sometimes depending on the scenario, LCD, like I may have put the LCD brightness to maximum. So visually, I shouldn't get misguided that it is actually overexposed. So I in fact enable the histogram on the right lower corner, and then using the histogram again I set the exposure. So for example, now if you see the histogram, the graph it shows a proper exposure. So here now in case if I start changing any of the parameter, look, the graph is moving to the right side, and right side you can see the graph has touched the right portion of the frame. Okay. So the lower right side, you all are seeing the exposure, the histogram. So it should not cross that right side. So again, take the exposure back. Okay. Now you see the gap over there. That kind of a gap has to be maintained on the right side. So if I just underexpose it a lot, again, see left side, it starts underexposing. So left side graph is going off to the left. That is not good. So this is how I look at the histogram. Now look at this. So this is a good exposure. Even this is a good exposure. This also is a good exposure. This also is a good exposure. So if you look at the graph, as long as the entire graph stays between the two extremes, it is a good exposure, and you can use that exposure to click and recover the things in post-processing. Okay. So this is how I shoot in complete manual mode. So manual shooting. So this is what I do. So if you see some of these basic camera settings, so this is where you need to have a very, very strong fundamental concepts of photography. You need to be really strong with that. And the whole calculation in your mind, you should be able to calculate it very fast, based on which you need to set these settings. Of course, all these things in the field, I do it much faster so that all the time I spend on composition and not on these things. Okay. So which are the buttons configured for shutter, f-stop and ISO? So Swaroop, you will have to find out in your camera which button is for what purpose. So in my case, the back dial basically is, or the main top dial is basically for the shutter speed. Front dial is for the aperture. Okay, and for ISO, I have the circular button, right click of that is basically ISO. So each camera will have its own set of buttons and functions to access the features. So that is something you have to check in your camera. So again, autofocus is a good 1 point or all. So Prince, like the whole autofocus points, like again, that is an in-depth thing what you have to understand, when to use what kind of focusing points, what autofocusing point does what, like single point, how exactly it achieves autofocus, a group of them, what it does, how it achieves. So it's a little bit in-depth, you have to go to understand each of those things. Okay. Yes, you can use the full frame zoom lens for APS-C cameras as well, Darshan. So exposure compensation is applicable for aperture and shutter priority. In case of manual mode, you saw like exposure compensation is applicable, but there is no dial to adjust it. You manually, when you change the things, the indicator will keep changing and will tell you whether it is overexposed or underexposed. No, Samir, I don't use camera strap. Camera strap comes in the way. It's a very, very bad thing to use camera strap. Of course, you have to be very careful handling the equipment. It should not fall. So that care you have to take. Otherwise, I don't use camera strap. Okay, good. Questions still coming in. In auto ISO and manual mode is best handled for bird photography. Yes, so Vishnu, in fact, auto ISO I do recommend, but you have to go within your camera setting and then you need to play around with what we call as the upper limit of ISO. Or in auto ISO, what should be the upper limit of ISO the camera can put. So you have to figure out that ISO beyond which you will get a lot of noise in your images. So you have to find out the threshold ISO and put that, or one stop below that you have to put and say, in auto ISO, do not go beyond this. So that is again an advanced setting what you have to figure out in your camera. How to reduce noise in image? Vinith, one thing is use low ISO, or other thing is to use neat image software. So when we jump over to the post-processing, I'll show you that. Okay, cool. Can you use RX102 for wildlife? Definitely. I use the RX104 actually. So RX100. Mine is, which one is that? I use RX4, not RX100. RX4 is what I use for my wildlife photography. Okay. How to find the max threshold on ISO for noiseless pictures? So that's an experiment which I have to conduct. Use a dark area, then keep shooting at different ISO, playback, and you will notice like from one ISO to the other ISO, when you move, the noise would be a lot more. Okay. So the previous ISO is the threshold or the shootable ISO, what I call. Okay. Okay, best binoculars for birding currently out of scope, but you can go for Olympus or Vanguard. Some of these binoculars are decent enough. Okay, now for creativity, next, move on to the next part of the presentation. Okay, cool. So the other one, art of composition. Now, this composition actually is extremely subjective. There is no right or wrong. Now, in my workshops or in my webinars, wherever I teach composition, so it is my perspective. Okay, so you are welcome to agree to it or disagree to it. Okay, so because the whole concept of composition, what I like, what I perceive, that is what I teach. And as I said, like you're welcome to differ that, and that is actually one way good, because like your own perspective, your vision, what you have may differ from mine, which is absolutely fine. Okay, so quickly let me take you through the art of composition. Now, when we talk about composition, personally for me, there are two kind of images which I really love to make. So one is basically the portrait, which is a close-up, or the one in the habitat. So I'll show you some of the images. Left is the portrait, right is a little bit showing the habitat. And again, these are portrait images. So generally the in-between works will not work well. So of course, initial part of this presentation, I'll show you what kind of images to shoot. And then a little bit after that, I'll get onto my website and I'll show you what images not to shoot. Okay, so both I'll be giving you an idea. So these are all again portraits, portrait, and then the habitat. So this is a proper habitat, and this is Dikala in Corbett. So this is what you get in the month of April, May, June in Corbett. And that is why I recommend going in that season for Corbett. So these are the kind of habitat shots which I really like, which conveys a sense of story. Again, this is where we use the concept of negative space, okay, to keep the subject very small and then include a signature element in the image, because the acacia tree, what you see, those are signature shots of Masai Mara. So every location generally has something called as a signature element, signature shot, or use that element to create that signature shot. Question, what is the optimal focal length for wildlife photography? So for us, like there is nothing called as an optimal focal for wildlife photography. As I said, so I use even the 24-105 lens for wildlife photography. Okay. So right from the 24-105 to the 600mm, 800mm I use for wildlife photography. So honestly, there is nothing called as an optimal or the best range for best range focal length for wildlife photography. It purely depends on composition. I mean, look at this particular composition. Would you believe if I say like this was actually shot with an 800mm? Okay. Yeah, I guess so. So this from very far I shot it. So that is where it looks very small, but this was shot from an 800mm. So it's again the perception, the distance from where you shoot and your overall composition. So that is what really matters. Okay. And then again, when we talk about playing with light, so for your composition, you have backlit, side lit, front lit, and the diffused light. So these are the different kind of lighting scenarios, what is available for your usage. So this is again a backlit, this is side lit, and other important thing in composition for side lit is make sure the eyes is always visible. So side lighting, sometimes the shadow may come onto the face. So that is something which you have to avoid. Again, the backlit of the ducks over here, the lesser whistling teals having a bath over there, and then this water sprinkling at the back. Again, a spotlight effect here using the whole concept of metering, underexposing it in evaluative or spot metering, zero exposure compensation. You create this thing. So this is a spotlight effect, what we call. Then again, a backlit. Again, moving on in wildlife photography, action and creativity again goes hand in hand, because it's just not capturing action. So for action, how will you compose the image is also important, because sometimes what happens, like you come across action and you capture the action, but it will have a lot of distraction. Again, the wow factor goes away. Okay, so that is something which you have to watch for. And so Rian's like spotlight, you don't get it, it will be there, you just have to make use of it. So spotlight is from a small area, the sunlight will be hitting just one small patch. So that is how the spotlight effect comes into picture. Okay, again, if you see a creativity action, the left again, image which is very close to me, but unfortunately I have lost the raw copy of that. I don't have it, got deleted by mistake. The entire series of raw images from that Bharatpur tour, it got deleted. Okay, but I just have these images left with me. And in fact, that's the image which Ganesh H. Shankar, a good friend of mine, he won the BBC or the Nat Geo, not Nat Geo, so in a Natural History Museum or the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year at that point of time. So he won the first prize for the same image which he shot. I mean, both of us, we shot it together. So he got the first prize for this. More of, again, creativity and action goes hand in hand, where sometimes like you use the diffused light and also post-processing the contrast, you reduce it to make these kind of images. Again, this was shot with an 800mm. Okay, so this looks like a wide angle shot, but again, very far, what we call as the long shots. So generally from a tele lens, we basically like get these long shots, which gives you a wide angle perspective, but it's actually a tele shot. Okay, so this again, the creativity which comes into picture. Again, action. And finally, of course, the black and white also comes into picture. And Priyansh, again, like how do we get flock of birds into focus? It's everything to do with autofocusing. It's to do with the depth of field. So the focusing plane comes into picture. So whichever plane the birds are flying in, that plane will be in focus. You want more of them in focus, you have to understand about the depth of field, increase the F number, increase the ISO. Again, that combination comes into picture. Okay. Of course, I mean, like all these things in depth, step by step, I explain as a part of my course. So that is where I would really encourage you all to explore my courses. Go ahead, sign up for that, and I can guarantee you, if you go in a step by step way, I do share something called as the photography learning path. So I share a document to help you get started, which course to do first, which chapter, next what assignment to do. So that entire document I share, and step by step, if you go through it, guaranteed all these things, what you have the doubts, easily everything will just go away and you can start making some awesome images. In the beauty of black and white, just to share some of those images. Of course, even when I'm shooting black and white, so in my case, what I do is like, I create these like high key images where I purposely overexpose the background and gives you again a nice creative touch to the image. So both the images, if you see, is purposely overexposed, but then retaining the contrast of the main subject. Again, some nice patterns, what we have. And of course, tiger over there. This is again a Dikala in Corbett. So you can see the dust speck over there. This was at 12:30 shot while we were returning, going back. On the main road itself, you can drive, and there we basically like got this. A couple of questions have come in. So how to shoot wild animals at eye or ground level? So Santan, you saw my shooting technique, right? So we remove the center seat of the gypsy, we sit lower. So that is how we get to the eye level in the safaris. Okay. Okay, so Darshan, again, what focusing points to use? That is honestly a little bit outside the scope of this particular presentation, because that again, I'll have to go in depth into how the camera achieves autofocusing, then how exactly the contrast and the light plays a role, then how does the depth of field come into picture, what is depth of field, the area, then again, a lot of those things I'll have to get deeper into it to answer your question. So again, Narayana, the same answer goes to you. If you have to get a blurred background, then again, you have to understand all the parameters responsible for depth of field, which is the focal length, then the camera to subject distance, and then the aperture, how each one has a role to play in the depth of field. So Prince, fine art photography is not just black and white, it's basically the creativity, the artistic way you represent your photographs, right? So that is basically what we call as the fine art. And 200D definitely for bird photography, but more than that, the lens is what is important. How do you manage the library of all your captures? When we jump next to post-processing, I'll show you. So black and white, I don't click monochrome. So I shoot color and then I process it in black and white. So black and white processing itself is a separate entity altogether. So what setting is, okay, Amit, that is a very broad question as to what setting to use to get a bird or tiger in golden light, because without knowing the scenario, without knowing what equipment you're using, is it backlight, is it front light, is it side light? So it's difficult to answer that. That is where my course is going to help you understand the fundamentals. So because there is no magic setting to get. So there is nothing called in this situation what setting to use. So as a photographer, as an artist, you have to decide what setting to arrive at. I mean, I showed you with the setup over here. So that is where you have to decide and then get that setting. I think this is a little tilted. All this time I didn't see. Okay, now probably fine. That's okay. And finally, I think post-processing. Let me see if I have missed anything. So Gautam, the 1.4 converter with the Sony 200-600, autofocusing, everything works absolutely brilliant. But then the small problem over there is like with respect to the focusing, I mean the sharpness, little bit it will compromise if you use a teleconverter. Okay, cool. All right. So the last portion of the whole discussion is to do with post-processing, and I'm glad a lot of you are still staying here. I know it's late, 2 hours is what I had planned, so we are almost up with the 2 hours. But post-processing, I quickly want to touch upon and show you the simple steps of post-processing, what I follow to get that punch in the image. Okay, so let's get on to that. How much can we play to get sharpness? So all those things about post-processing, how I use it, what I do, let me show it to you. So for that, I may have to end up sharing the entire screen, so that's okay. Okay, so let me just minimize all these things. Cool. So let me just take this example to let you know, like, what are the steps I follow for my post-processing. Okay. Now, so this is Adobe Camera Raw, cancel. So what you see here, this is Adobe Camera Raw, and the way I organize my folders, right? Let me just show it to you. So I have photography teaching, so everything related to photography teaching. So I have a separate folder for that, where I have my Facebook lives or Instagram lives, content for that, a lot of those things. Then I have my wildlife section, and then wildlife and videos are segregated it, and personal is all the personal albums what I have. So, and videos is like all the video content I keep creating. So that goes into the video folder. Within wildlife, I again segregate year-wise, and also like anything specific for prints I do, or recently like I'm getting into NFT. So this is a folder of all my NFT images. So I segregate that. Again, this is miscellaneous. So 2021, if I go in that again, all the tools and month specific folders are maintained. So Bharatpur, February, then BRT Kabini event in March, Kaziranga in April, then Mattigata last weekend with friends I had gone there, then Ranthambore Jan, Ranthambore July, then some of the since I'm a Samsung brand ambassador as well, so all the Samsung related projects goes into this. So this is how I maintain my separate folders, and also I have a process folder with all the processed images again in a similar way, park wise it goes into it. So all Kabini related images are into this folder for the year 2021. Okay, so this is how I basically organize my folders. And what you see here, this is Adobe Bridge. So Adobe Bridge is more of an image management tool. Okay, and guys, I have closed the chat window. So if you're asking any questions, I'll not be able to see. So just hold on to the questions because I can see on top the chats which are coming up. But as I've closed the session, I'll not see that. So just hold on for some time. Now here, if you see like in Adobe Bridge, okay, so I'll be back. Hold on, I'm just putting it back. Okay, sorry about that. My audio. Yeah, mic is fine. I just ran out of battery, so I just had to replace the battery. You're good to go. Yeah. So as I was saying, like, so this is the Adobe Bridge software. So in Adobe Bridge, I shortlist all the images, then do a right click and open it. Oh yeah, yeah. So I right click and open. So this is Adobe Bridge. So sorry, this is Adobe Camera Raw. So let me just move this one to the side. Okay. And right side are all the very, very basic adjustments what I do. Like, let me show you. Now, the first thing is like I study the image and I try to like visualize how the original thing was and then try to get it close to that and then little bit improvise. So the first thing what I do is I change the profile to Adobe Vivid because it gives you a little bit better color, contrast, those things it improves. And then each of the sliders what I have here, so I keep playing around with up and down. So it's not that if I use the temperature slider to decide a white balance, I stick to that. No. Again, I may revisit it at a future point when I use some of the other sliders. So let's watch that. So temperature, like fine, because the color of the tiger also is important. Look at this color of the tiger and look at this color. So I want to keep it in between. And overall, like exposure, I want to overexpose it a little bit. And most importantly, I love a little bit of high contrast. So contrast. So if you see, like by increasing the contrast, the punch also increases, the image becomes dark. So since the image becomes a little dark, I use the shadows to get those shadow details. So wherever the image gets underexposed, so I use the shadow slider to bring in, enhance those specific areas. And also, like if you see here, okay, so this was shot very late in the evening and was able to get this image. That's where you see a little bit of noise. And then the highlights, I reduce it. See here, the white areas overexposed, underexposed, you can control that with the highlights. Okay, so let's go back and then little bit whites and then the blacks again. Now here then what I do once I make these basic adjustments, vibrance, I increase it to get the nice colors. So if you see, okay, and then again I play around with the contrast a bit, exposure a bit, and then temperature, if it is too yellowish, I just play around. So if you see, like I go back and forth with the sliders to get the right one. And here, this is the left side is the before, right side is the after. So this is the first round of change what I do basically. Like if you see, okay, so that's the first round of basic adjustment what I do. And then from here, I take it to Photoshop. Okay, here if you see the face area is actually still a little bit underexposed. So that is where in Photoshop, I do all the other minor adjustments. So from Adobe Camera Raw, I now export it to Photoshop. So just want to take some time to read here. Okay. Let me still use the full screen because I can show it. Otherwise, like generally the first step what I do is like I resize the image and then use it. So let me just use a high resolution for now. So if I say 2000 pixels, yep, still like, let me do 3000. Okay, so 3500 is at least quite huge, which covers the screen for me to still continue showing you the techniques. Now the next set after a resize is I go into levels. So level adjustment, again, there are techniques to get the correct exposure. Where you see this pixels it starts to appear, that means those areas are overexposed. So get it back. So I use the Alt key to get it. So this is again to adjust the highlights or the brightness. On the left side again, things are already good. I will not touch it. So this is basically a very high level of the adjustment of the levels. Now comes the targeted adjustment what I do. So for example, here in this, if you look at the eye, so the eye portion is still little dark. I mean, like if you want your image to really pop out, then you need to make sure the eyes, it shines like not overly done, but it should be properly visible. So this is where I use the targeted adjustment. And I don't care about the rest of the image. Just to show you the difference, let me do a little bit of overdo those things. Okay. So this is like that Arjuna during shooting that arrow for the fish. Forget about the rest of the world. Focus on what you're trying to achieve. So for me, I need to get the correct exposure for the eye area. I do the adjustment and then I apply the targeted adjustment for that. I do Command I, use my brush. Look at this. So just the eye. So this is before, this is after. Okay, and these are all the standard techniques with which photographers worldwide they do. Nobody tells you what they do. Okay, and being a teacher, I don't like to hide things. Openly, I can share with you what everybody does. So once I do that, I'll just flatten the layer. Now comes the sharpness. I go into filter, sharpen, smart sharpen. Again, these are all the standard settings what we have, which we use for sharpening the image. So this is where again, when you're sharpening, you should not over sharpen the image. You have to be very careful with sharpening. Okay. So I use 120, little bit over sharpen, which I love for again Instagram posting. And as a final step, there is still a lot of noise in the image. Okay, so I have installed Neat Image as a plugin for this, and I use Neat Image to reduce the noise. So all these are sampling it does, simple steps. There you go. So the entire, now let's look at the backdrop. So let me do a before after. Okay, edit, undo. So the noise, you see it, redo. The noise goes away. Okay, so these are the very, very basic steps what I do. So right from the beginning to the processing, as you saw, simple steps is basically what I do. Now let me just take up all the questions which have come up. Okay. So could you please disable your video so that we can see your screen fully? Okay, too late for that. Can't hear you. Oh, okay. Sorry. So this is when I think I lost the battery. Can't hear you. Video audio not available. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so Shine, only just now I saw your message to disable the video. I'm sorry. So merge layer and flattening more or less, they are the same. That's right. Okay, so how do you get the beautiful color on the tiger? Yes, that is where you have to play around a little bit with the white balance, with the contrast, with the hues, little bit you play around with that, the vibrance. So it's a combination of all these things to get a proper color tonality of the tiger. And one thing is like the tiger colors from South India to Central India to the North or the East, it varies. So they're not the same. South Indian tigers and the one in Corbett, they're more orangish in color, whereas the Central Indian tigers and Ranthambore, they are more yellowish in color. Okay. So this again, of course, this is in Ranthambore. You can see it's more yellowish, and Kabini, when we go, it's more orangish in color. So the color variation happens. So I don't use Lightroom. I have tried Lightroom. No major difference between Lightroom and what I follow the process. Everything is the same. So I'm just sticking to this. And Lightroom, what you saw, the corrections, what I did in Adobe Camera Raw, that is the same what you do in Lightroom, because the backend settings of Adobe Camera Raw, it is the same. Okay. Okay, now let me go to the questions from the down. Which feature allows us to focus on the eye and edit? So that is basically the targeted adjustment, what we call, where we create layers, use the levels and adjust just for the eye portion, or for that matter, any portion in the image. So how is the noise reduction quality in the camera? In fact, not bad. But unfortunately, since we shoot in RAW mode, so the noise reduction what you use in the camera is not applicable for the RAW files. So that is the reason we will have to redo it here. And Prashant, yes, I do recommend selective sharpening, because honestly, it doesn't make sense to sharpen this out of focus area. So at the back, if you see that entire out of focus area, I mean, like, it doesn't make sense to sharpen the pixels over there. So that is where I still use the layering technique to do selective sharpening. So, I mean, here I just showed you the general steps what I follow, but yes, selective sharpening is what I would recommend. Okay. Best timing to shoot photos when you get the subjects. Simple answer. Okay, of course, that said, the early morning, late evening are always the best. So Ganesh, there is nothing called as the best software for editing. It's more about how comfortable you are with using the specific software. Okay, because for me, the Lightroom and Adobe Camera combination, all these are the same. So since I play a lot around with images to put my logo, resizing some of those things in Adobe Photoshop, so I use this particular workflow. Okay. So do you remember the exposure triangle for this particular type of photo? I just opened the Adobe Bridge and All the exposure triangle parameters are there. It was shot at 3200 ISO, f2.8, 1/500 with an exposure compensation of -1. Cool. So it's the neat image what I use is basically it's a pro edition which comes at around $75 lifelong. Okay, so it's a one-time purchase of $75. The neat image software which I use, that's pretty good it. And also there is Noise Ninja, and then there are a couple of other noise removal software. I have tried the other ones. Topaz also I have tried, but I prefer the neat image because the way the neat image works is much better than how the Noise Ninja or the Topaz it works. Best noise reduction software, it's neat image, and it's not there for Camera Raw. It's always for the JPEG version what I use. Pictures taken with mid-range camera can be beautiful in post-processing to highest quality level. Yes, that's right, Samir. Even from a mid-range camera, if you take, right? So from a processing point of view, if you're able to process the image really well, then easily you should be able to get some really high quality images. So that said, like as I keep saying, depending on your entry-level equipment, lens what you use, and no using UV filters. A very, very important tip and a point: do not use a UV filter for your lens. It doesn't have any role. It just degrades the image quality. Okay. So depending on all those factors, and then post-processing comes into picture. Once you process, there is no way anybody can find out with what equipment you have shot the image. And Riyansh, yes, I always shoot in the raw mode. Okay. So till how many years you can use a camera? As long as it can last. There is nothing called as the camera life, because once the shutter, if you're using a DSLR and the shutter elapses, you can just get the shutter changed and you can continue shooting. So there is nothing called as like how long you can use a camera. In fact, I have the Canon 1200D. I still use it when it comes to teaching certain things. So I still use the Canon 1200D, which is, I don't know like how old it is, but camera lives, lens life generally are quite long. And I don't use any kind of filters. Okay. So how to protect the front element? You have to be very, very careful. So it's like you buy a new car and it has awesome seat, leather seat, or the fabric seat, everything is really beautiful. And in India, what we do first thing, we just put a cover, car cover, a seat cover, because it should not get dirty. But then the real fun, the smoothness, we never enjoy the real beauty of the original fabric of the car seat if you just put a cheap quality cover on top of that. So same way, when you're driving a car, you have to make sure you don't carry the coffee inside the car and spill it on the fabric, okay, or the leather seat for that matter. So those are some basic precautions you have to take care of your equipment, your car. Okay, and oops. Okay, so let me take up a few more queries. We already overshot a lot. And yeah, probably like what we can do is like some of the any generic ones you have related to the things itself. You can, no, I'm not planning to sell the, oh, Canon 400. Sorry, I don't have the Canon 400. I already sold it. All my Canon things are sold. I just have the Canon 1DX Mark II I have, and then the Canon 1200D I just for the settings point of view. And also I have a Nikon D7500 and my very old Canon EOS R, I still have it. Not EOS R, EOS Elan 2E, which has the eye controlled autofocusing, which EOS R, they're introducing it. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have. Okay, and lens calibration, it purely depends on if you're facing any issues with the DSLR.